Welcome to this autumn 2025 Rune reading, covering the period for September and October. I apologise for not getting it out on the 1st of September, but I was preparing for an exciting writing course that I was taking part in and also doing other things. So today has been the first opportunity, and I felt a strong urge to get it done because, as always, I go with my intuition on these things. Now, very interestingly, my intention originally was to read just one rune, to select just one rune, but the rune that came out was Uras at the bottom of this reading in the directly reversed position, which featured very strongly in my August reading. So I decided to choose 3 further runes. I could see why Uras would still be present, but of course the expression can change whilst the theme remains the same. And the theme of Uras in this position is very much one about talking about structure. And this is structure, particularly physical structures, but also the structures that govern our lives. So to give an example of the sort of things that would fall under this kind of representation, the governance, wars that are taking place, agreements and disagreements between countries or between authorities. What has an impact upon us from outside is also significant here, but financial systems, and in a personal reading, of course, this will refer more to the person's own life and how that impacts upon them. But even within that, there will be aspects of authority. For example, most of us have to deal with a certain number of systems or regulations or ways of doing things at work, for example. And that is a way that we interact with authority, and we all do it without even realizing. And often it's a very positive thing, and sometimes it isn't. But to come back to this rune and my impressions on it, because I feel into it with my intuition. Now, in August, I was talking about the structures, the upheavals, the different ways things are flaring up or dying down in our world. And there certainly have been a lot of things that have come up to the surface where we would say it concerns countries or it concerns larger organisations and the ways of handling things. And this has applied to many, many different lands. But also with this rune, another structure that is very significant that I did refer to in my August reading is the aspect of Mother Earth, the aspect of tectonic plates, for example, that are part of the physical structure of Mother Earth, but really everything from climate to, changes in nature. I'm going to put it like that. But as I'm observing this rune, what the thoughts that are coming to mind for me are of cracking. Now, in my August reading, I did refer to the likelihood of more earthquakes, particularly in the Pacific Rim area, and also of we'd had the mega quake at the end of July off the coast of Russia in a very remote place, fortunately, where, as far as we know, it didn't harm anybody. But we know that within that Pacific Rim area, there is always a lot of activity. So what I'm talking about here is more or unusual activity. And I still feel there is the possibility, a heightened possibility, of a mega quake, which I believe the experts say is a quake over 8, which rarely occur. But I also feel there is a greater number of earthquakes in different places where we would say there is more activity than we would normally expect, because activity happens in many different areas all of the time. So it's important to be aware of that. So what I'm talking about here is exceptional in terms of where it is, how much of it there is. That can also be, of course, a lot of medium-sized quakes where they would not normally be expected or not expected in the numbers that they occur. I also feel with this that there is perhaps more news coming up on geology features that are bringing to our attention things that we didn't know that we need to be aware of with Mother Earth. I know that in recent times there's been the idea of there being a super plume under the air, under Africa, part of Africa, for example, going down through Tanzania, but into other countries as well because of the rift that is there. But the super plume is about very deep volcanic activity. And again, to look at that, there is said to be one in New Zealand, off the coast of New Zealand in the Pacific Ring of Fire. Increasingly, it is accepted that there is one under Iceland, but now it is also accepted that there is this situation in Africa, and it's not really about being scared, but it is about being aware and knowing that our Mother Earth does not have perhaps the same stability that we thought it had, and that it is changeable in more ways than we had been aware of. And again, that knowledge is a good thing. It's good to have that knowledge. It's good to be aware. But coming back to other factors that I talked about in that reading that are showing in this one is very much about the upheavals within countries, within political systems. That seems to be getting even stronger. And also the feeling of very authoritarian, patriarchal ways trying to grab the power base or to hang on to it. And part of that is because there is a feeling that that power base could slip away. But holding on to that is bringing up even more extremes than I feel we have seen already. So just to be aware, I feel it's good for all of us to be aware when we read something, when we hear something, to kind of ask ourselves the question, is that extreme? Where do we think, that is sourced? What is the motivation behind it? Is it coming from fear and a desire to hang on? Or is it coming from compassion and creativity? Compassion for the many rather than for the few. And I feel that this is really something, this compassion for the many as against compassion for the few, compassion for those that we choose, rather than simply saying we are all deserving of compassion, wherever we may be and wherever we may be from. I feel that this is really coming up to the bubble in the cauldron of life at the moment, but especially around the end of October. But coming to the three runes in the top row, we have one yo, which is about winning and winning through into joy. It's also about self-confidence, but it's upside down here. And what this is saying is that our joy, our ability to feel confident, to have faith in life going forwards. And by that I mean to have faith in life unfolding in a positive way, in the way that we would hope to see it, because of all the confusion. I really feel it is a mass of confusion that is taking some of our joy away from us. But we need to be bold. We need to fight to take that joy back. Because when this rune appears, there's always the possibility of creating a turning point when it is in this position. And it's good to ask ourselves the question, what can we do personally to head towards our own inner turning point so that we feel as good as we can in these trying times? But also to float ideas collectively as what can we do to create a turning point that makes life feel smoother, that creates more abundance in a better way. And by abundance, I'm not talking about material things beyond having enough. I'm talking about abundance in the form of well-being, of creating joy, of creating pleasure, of creating life in ways that feel good for more people, that value more people. But in the centre here, we also have another rune that appeared in the August reading, which does, of course, look like a crossroads. That makes it, a crossroads that we feel it's not always easy to walk forwards from. It's not always easy to decide our pathway, but we can do it. And we are at a stage with the breaking apart and the breaking down now, which is the beginning of the time when it's perhaps easier to start to think in terms of walking forward, to start to think at least of what we would want to see on that pathway, how to create it, and how to value it, and how to see people and their needs as more equal, not as extremes, but how can we encompass more of what more people want without going to extremes, but creating a feeling of well-being, a feeling of positivity. And this is indeed a question that I feel September and October, but especially the end of October, will be asking us to give consideration to. And on the right at the top, we have a wonderful rune. We have algaes, which is about being bold, is about being confident, is about standing proudly. But it is not the kind of pride that says, I stand proudly and others can't do the same. It is important, I feel, increasingly to see it that way if we want to move in a direction that benefits us all. And as I look at that room, I want to root it in the soil and plant it, particularly around October. But then I want to say, that planting place, it's like it's there for a short period of time. It's temporary. It's a stepping stone. But it's a stepping stone that we can decide to walk boldly forwards from, and then plant that tree of life in a better place a little later on. And that does indeed offer a choice that can feel exciting for those who want to say that they have really had enough of things around them being as they are. And that planting of the tree of life, we can envision it as something small in our own heart, perhaps a little plant, perhaps just a seed that needs to grow. And we can water it daily by asking ourselves the question, what is it that I would like to grow from this seed? And if we can't imagine anything, and we can't think anything, and we can't see anything, we still should remember that we can water that seed simply by giving it love and by asking our mind to draw our attention to those things that we come upon in our everyday lives that can be moments of inspiration or moments of beauty, in the certain knowledge that we will be able to water that plant in a way that we can imagine it growing into something in particular. But if you feel you need to imagine something now, perhaps you could start by asking yourself the question, if that seed had a colour, if what it could start to grow into had a colour, or it represented a flower, what would that be? Thank you for joining me for this autumn rune reading. I may do another reading at the beginning of October, which would overlap somewhat with this one. And I will, of course, see how things go during the intervening weeks. But I wish you a nice autumn, and I hope that the weather is kind to you. It is being very kind here in Iceland at the moment. It is nice and warm. It has been sunny. And I understand that unseasonably warm and sunny weather has been forecast for both the far north of Norway and Finland, and I believe also Sweden. So there are many good things that nature is bringing for us to experience. But we are at a stage where I feel we are understanding more of what we need to understand. And I view that as a positive thing. And it is with positive thoughts that I would like to leave you today. Thank you for joining me.